everybody. I have been asked to chair a panel session. We're missing one of our speakers, so hopefully Mark hasn't ducked out already, to field questions from the audience and get some feedback on the presentations that we've heard this morning. Thank you, everybody. Because I've got the microphone, I'm going to go first and cheat, and that gives us a chance for you to all think about what you might like to ask our speakers. I quite like the How's My Driving campaign on the back of lorries. How would that work if we had a How's My Farming campaign in Herefordshire? You know, the campaign is designed to increase... Oh, Mark's coming back. So I'm just asking about the How's My Driving campaign, Mark, and whether there would be benefits and what the limitations might be if we used a How's My Farming campaign approach to improve visibility and accountability in food production, supply chains, those sorts of things. So I don't know who would like to try and tackle that as a question first, and then we'll throw out to the audience if that's okay. Oh, Ben's quick on the mic. Thank you, Ben.
I don't know what. Is this working? Yeah.
Yep.
How's my farming? I think the biggest problem with farming from a farmer's perspective, you don't know what you don't know. And most farmers I speak to, from a consultancy point of view, are doing a fantastic job with the knowledge they have and the knowledge that's applied by advisors, shall I say. And sadly, it's probably only about 15% of what we should know about soil, soil life, soil biology, soil mechanics, soil physics, plant physiology, all that sort of thing that is massively lacking. Often backed by, let's be honest, big ag, farmer, all that sort of thing. So there's an awful lot of reasons to be advised, be doing things, and I think that's the main problem. So in terms of the knowledge they're given and the knowledge they have, I think they're driving really well. What they are doing is sadly probably in the fast lane with their brakes on, and therefore it'd be fantastic if they could actually have the brakes released and actually understand most of the farming techniques and farming methods that might massively help them.
Thank you. Emma, Mark, how would you feel if Puffin or two farmers had labels in the gateways of any of the fields supplying you?
Good. I think overall. I think in regards to a comparison, if you think about farming, the first thing you've got to understand or try and determine is what is good. What does good look like? If you're driving a car, if you're following someone who's speeding or crashing into someone or whatever else, you might have an informed opinion on whether that's good or bad. I think with farming, it's so nuanced, farm to farm, as Ben says. You could have two farmers side by side who would both consider themselves to be doing good or both consider it to be a tricky time, but they could have two very different outcomes. And again, I think even within the industry, I think if you are a farmer, you'll drive around and look over the hedge and say, oh, heck, what's going on in there? Or, they've done very well and all of those sort of things. But I think a lot of it is also that consumer side facing and the general public facing of, I think, farming, we can always do better, like everyone, we can always do better. But what sort of better? Is it keeping mud off the roads? Is it looking after our hedges slightly differently? Is it making sure we're maintaining footpaths through fields? I think there's lots of things we can go at and remember that we are responsible for and we are proud to look after within our landscape, certainly.
Yes, I fully understand the start of the question. I may have missed it, but I think I've got the gist of it now. But I think all farmers are dedicated to sharing knowledge, is where you're going. And I think there's many things over the years that farmers are involved in. They do share knowledge. I think the first ways of sharing knowledge in farming were ploughing matches. That's how farmers first came to share knowledge before we had anything like the internet or anything. And I think a lot of farmers all farmers are very interested in what they're doing. I think sometimes farmers get so deep and being at the coalface of their farms, trying to produce an income, that they don't have a lot of time to look at what's going on around them. Farmers are hardworking, I hope we are. And I think that's probably a lot of sharing information. I guess a lot of farmers don't get the time to share information. And a lot of what I spoke about today comes with quite a cost. And within my farm, I bear that cost in a lot of the things that we're doing with satellites and things. And I think a lot of farming families and farmers can't afford to do the things that I'm doing. So by sharing information maybe and more help, then I think farmers would be more, would look to do these sort of things and help. But farmers don't compete against each other. We're not competing against each other. We're producing food. We're not in competition. So I do feel within what I do in farming, we do share a lot of ideas.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, let's go to the audience. Pat's quick on the draw. So we'll have the first question from you, please.
Hi there, Pat Sterling, Friends of the River Wye, and when I'm not doing that, I am a full disclosure, a carbon consultant, so a lot of the stuff that was being shown I'm very, very familiar with, working with global supply chains, etc. So really good to see those things being brought together, the local and the global. My question actually comes from the fact that I was 2 weeks ago on the same day, in the same morning, talking in conversation with Paul Withers at Lancaster University, and Walter Simon, one of the potato farmers of your potato farmers, Emma. The interesting part of that conversation was that Paul, as he ever is, was incredibly clear about the challenges in the Wye. We have several thousand tonnes of excess P going, surplus P going in every year, and we have a legacy P problem whereby we've got P levels in the soil so high that we see a lot of leaching, etc. When Paul said, well, what we need to do is go to zero input farming, zero P input in the Wye catchment, Walter's response was, well, that's great, but my potato crops, you take out, if you take off the phosphorus, the yield drops. It's going to drop by 10%, my margin's at 8%. I can't do it. Paul's position was, we think we can get to zero input P and still maintain margins here in the Wye. So does this panel agree that it's possible to do that? And if it's possible amongst the innovators, how do we get everybody doing it, including the Welsh side of the border, of course, and everyone in the Wye, so that we get to the point where we've got no more excess P in the water?
Thanks, Pat. Ben, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, can do. So phosphate availability to a potato crop, as to any plant, is reliant on three things. Soil pH, and there's an absolute sweet spot of pH of soil in order to allow accessibility of 6.5, which, to be honest, most of the Wye Valley is sat in that perfect sweet spot. The second thing is biological activity. All phosphate gets to a plant through biological process. So the reason we're putting life in the soil is to take trichoderma, for instance, that we know will pick up phosphate and deliver it to a plant. So that's a massive focal point that we all have to work on in order to get this phosphate to the plant. And the third thing is organic matter, which Mark's touched on. It's really important that you have enough of a buffering system in order to exchange anions. I'm sure we're familiar that phosphate is an anion, and therefore, in actual fact, isn't held onto cationic exchange capacity clay. So the really important thing is to have an anionic exchange on organic matter. So in order to get phosphate cycling into a plant, you need those three things. The last thing you need to do, sadly, is to add more phosphate. It creates huge problems to the plant itself, in actual fact, and a thing called the rhizophagy cycle and how that operates. I won't go into that.
Mark?
Yeah, so I'm probably not going to be the most popular person when we start to look at phosphates, because in my farming, I'm not actually looking at putting zero phosphates in. I've got to produce food. We need to produce food in the UK. But what I'm trying to strive to is, if we've got good soils, then we should be able to put that on. And I think that goes hand in hand with what Ben's just saying, is that we need better understanding with more things we put in the soil and better health. But when our soils are healthy, they will lock up the things that you're thinking about, phosphates, and they will hold them, because all our crops need it. My potatoes need phosphate not only to grow, but that makes them store. We need to store potatoes to be able to supply potatoes to Emma for the whole year. We need to store them, and we need phosphate because it's an element of storing the potatoes and keeping quality. And as a farmer, I'm after and striving to produce the best quality food I can to put on the shelves for everybody to buy. And I need a lot of these components when I'm farming to help me get that quality. So I agree that we don't want to be leaching, but to actually go to zero, if the soils need it, as a farmer, I want to apply them. But at the same time, unless my soils are in a really good health and are really good, then I would be applying them, and I possibly then could be losing them under certain conditions. And that's what I'm striving to do, is to make sure that our soils are capable of locking up these elements so that then the crops can use them.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I am very passionate about water and what we do in our county, and how, as farmers and landowners and land managers, we look after the land that we are responsible for. And I think that when it comes to phosphate and it comes to nutrient applications and fertiliser and how we grow our crops, it's always the saying is it's the how, not the cow. So, you know, as much as we've got to produce food. So spuds obviously have a response to phosphate in all the literature, and if I'm a farm advisor or a farm consultant and I'm writing my farmer or grower a fertiliser rec for what we need to put on nutrition-wise, it'll say, if you're growing a crop of spuds, you need to put on X number of kilos of phosphate to get that yield and get the store and all the benefit. So I think if we want to look at going zero phosphate in the county, nationally look at our usage, it's very much looking at actually what we know. So we need a whole load more data to be able to say to Mark, look, we can drop it by 10% and it's going to store. As you say, it's not a 1 year thing, it's a 5 year thing, it's a 10 year thing. I think outside of potatoes, certain crops have this response to phosphate. Not every crop and not every situation. So I think if we're looking as a county, a catchment, however, to reduce our phosphate, it's a collaborative approach. And I think in Herefordshire in particular, there is a lot of awareness. There's a lot we can do, and it's not always just artificial fur. It's also, what are we doing before and after these root crops? What are we doing in the rest of the rotation? You could have a zero phosphate potato crop, but it could have had, you know, very intensive slurry applications or fertiliser applications for 6 years beforehand. So I think it's a whole system approach, it's a whole industry approach. And when I say whole industry, as Ben said, it's also the person giving that advice of how we go about producing a crop and how we're going to get there nutritionally. And yeah, as I am passionate about nutrients, Puffin Farmers will be we will be looking at it and how we can use varieties and either side of rotations as well.
Sarah.
Very quickly, from a non-farmer's point of view, I did grow up on a farm, but I'm not a farmer. I think it's actually quite dangerous to do a blanket approach to say we're just going to zero phosphorus. Maybe we could look at a catchment scale and say overall we want to do X, but balance that out. So actually we're going to draw down some in this area, but actually you have to make it commercially viable. No one's going to buy into it if you say we have to put in these measures and actually you're going to lose money and it's going to cost you. So I think it's really important any measures have to be commercially viable, and that's what hopefully we're trying to work on, is to find solutions that actually benefit financially. So yeah, that's my point. I think we have to look at it, all farmers know their fields best on an individual level, and to actually drill down at a field scale rather than the blanket. The aspiration I totally understand, but I think there has to be some balance there.
Thank you. Another question here.
Hi there, I'm Lucy Crockford, a lecturer at Harper, and my specialism is actually in phosphorus, so I'm delighted to be here. Thank you, Liz. I just wanted to point out that in a previous life, I was the analyst who you sent your soil samples to, and then I told you how much available phosphorus was for your plants. And what we do in a lab is you try to emulate what roots do in the ground. We add chemicals that will release that phosphorus from the soil, and then we tell you you have a P index of whatever. In Ireland, we do an acid extraction. It's called Morgan's P. In the UK, we do an alkaline extraction called Olsen's P, which you might all know. And apparently, they're going to be telling us the same thing, yet we have two different pHs being used to extract that P. We then receive your soil, often it's fresh, but then we dry it, and we sieve it, and we treat it. I am very dubious about the fact that your index that you're receiving in the post is actually anyway reflective of what's happening in the ground. And I may be unpopular to say that. I have been testing phosphorus since I was 23 years old. I am an expert. I did a phosphorus calibration by hand yesterday. It was absolutely perfect, 0.993, thank you very much. And it's something that I have spent 15 years studying phosphorus. I am very dubious about the available phosphorus testing that's done in soils. The difference between Ben soils and some of the beaten soils that we have in different parts of farming who are not engaging in these fantastic events, all you guys that are here are probably on the track of actually doing the stuff that we're talking about. It's a huge difference. The microbes are key, and I can see Ben dying to go. Discuss.
Was there a question in that? Sorry.
It's more a discussion. Do you agree? Do you think it's something that needs to be tackled? How do we do that? Thank you for making me clarify.
Yeah, thank goodness somebody's brought that up. But what I say about modern farming, tragically, is poor agronomy precisely applied. We're fighting over the wrong things. We're fighting over data points of how many times you measure something across a hectare. What we should be measuring is how we actually analyse the soil index system. The sooner that's banned, it should be banned from the UK. It's absolutely ridiculous. What we do when we measure soils is actually measure total phosphate, the whole soil profile. And what you'll often notice is the available amount of phosphate is obviously determined exactly what I've just said on the basis of the pH of organic matter and life. You might have 3,000, 4,000 kilos of phosphate a hectare, 30 kilos cycling because you've got a pretty dead soil. But you could have 300 kilos of a hectare of phosphate in your soil, really good biological activity, and it is just motoring at you. And that's what we've got to understand. And this is what I said about when I said people don't know what they don't know. And sadly, this whole reliance on the perfect fertilizer salesman being able to advise based on a soil index system is a fantastic way of selling fertilizer. It's an awful way of farming.
Another question, please, from the floor. Oh, you're all waking up now, these hands. Richard, should we come to you next?
Should I go on that one, Kate, in a minute?
Yeah, I'll come to you after John.
So
Yeah.
I've reduced the phosphate in my potato crops on my farm.
Okay.
The last 4 years.
No, go on, Richard. Thank you.
Richard Tyler from Save the Wine. On a different subject, soil erosion, I'd be interested in the farming panels members who can perhaps talk to us about how they prevent or reduce erosion of particularly open soils.
Thank you. Mark, are you happy to go first?
Yes, I guess that's a huge topic with the weather we've just had and the weather that we're going to get. As a farmer, my life revolves around the weather. And I would say that we've had big rain events and big droughts in the past, but we seem to be getting more rain events, more frequent. And that is a huge challenge for us on the farm, because when we get huge rain events, soil will move, whether it's here or it was in Spain a couple of weeks ago. It's around the world, it's not just the UK. And we're having to change what we're doing in farming with that. But we've got to remember that farming isn't changeable on a weekly basis. It's something that we have to start changing over a number of years. And I think with soil movement and erosion, it comes back to where I started, and Ben, is that if you've got good soils, they will erode less. I never say they won't erode, but they'll erode less. So what we're trying to do is get the good soils, get the soils back, and then we've got to look at how we're farming, which we're doing with different equipment. Ben showed pieces of equipment on the video today that is going straight into a green cover crop and planting, and we're doing a lot of that. So when I was talking, I said we're moving the soil less with powered machinery, so we're not making it so fine. We're using legs in the machines to try and move the soil. So hopefully we're doing all these things that are going to try and stop erosion, but not stop it, lessen it, because I don't think we can ever stop erosion, because we will always get some. Making sure that we've always got a green cover crop on the land, we've always got a crop growing. This year has been the most challenging autumn for some time to get a harvested crop from August onwards and then get it into another green cover crop or a cereal. So those are hugely important things that we're working on the farm. We're looking at varieties all the time that will come earlier. So especially in maize, that would be a big one. That's probably a hot topic to people, that the maize gets harvested and then it erodes. So we're looking at maize varieties that come earlier and earlier, and maybe they'll come early September, not early October. So I think there's a lot of work being done on it, but I don't think, for those who think that it's going to stop tomorrow morning or this time next year it's going to happen. It's something that is work in progress, but as a farmer, we are fully on board that erosion is a big topic. And as me as a farmer, erosion is the worst thing I want, because where's all my good soil? It's gone down to the bottom of the field. I've got to get it to the top, or it may have gone further. So I think as a farmer, I don't want erosion, and it's something that I'm very conscious of and dealing with.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, interesting. We were talking before we actually sat down about the challenging autumn. And I think the big thing, we look on our farm of if we haven't got things green, we're mightily upset. We've got 2 fields of lime green this year. Anybody looked at the weather? You know, and I think you work on the 80-20 rule. Try and get 80% right. You're never going to get it 100% right, no matter what you do and what you try. You've got a bit of wheat you need to get in. It was destined to be planted. But unfortunately, if the fields are waterlogged to the point you can't actually, you'll make more damage and cause more erosion by going and doing the wrong thing. So in actual fact, yes, I think we're all aspiring. You were talking about your cover crops and everything you're growing, and half the farm is down as green cover. Fantastic. That's intercepting a lot of rainfall, preventing erosion, knitting the soil together. But there are going to be times, sadly, as this weather seems to be getting more and more extreme, that these things just aren't happening. So I think we're both going out of our way to keep things green.
Thank you. Back to John at the back, who had a point or a question to make.
Yeah, just a couple of things, because I'm a potato chicken farmer.
Would you like to take the microphone with your...
I'm a potato chicken farmer in the county. Great to see you, Pat. I went intrepidly to a meeting with Pat, and he told me that 2 brooks down my chicken potato farm were cleaning up the water coming from the brook by the Kingston treatment plant. So nice to see you again, Pat. Thanks for that. So I've got clean water. You could testify that, yeah? So it is possible, but going back to the phosphates, Ben, could I ask you, do you think Mark's GPS stuff is not worth doing?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was quite good, Mark, but there you go. We'll go on to the carbon. But yeah, on our farm, we didn't trust all this stuff, and yeah, like the lady said from Ireland, or Harper, I think she said. So we started cutting out phosphates, and our yield reduction was less than we thought. And we're actually commercially growing 75% of our potatoes with half of what people tell us to put on. And we've saved the cost of the phosphate, and that kind of equals the yield reduction, which we're putting at 4 and 5%. I agree with you. We're pushing the boat out, my son and I, but we want to learn. And that's what we've done. Is that salient?
Yep. Thank you. Another question. Andrew at the back.
Hi, Andrew McCloud from CPRE. A much simpler question for you, so it's not going to be scientific, this one, guys. Please could each of you on the panel say what action you will take in 2025 to improve the environment and the ecology of the Y catchment. I just want to bring us back to, on the board there, Rivers Conference, mitigating risk. So what are you going to do? Thank you.
Thank you. Who'd like to go first? Sarah, ladies first.
In front of me, go on then. Well, what can I do? What will I be doing? I will be hopefully supporting people to improve what they do every day, and offering advice where I can on reducing erosion, what we can do at, for example, wetlands, buffers, etc. Any way of keeping soils on land, and also reducing, improving nutrient use efficiency. That's where I'm aiming to go, and just to provide support and technical advice where I can.
Bit of a cheat answer here. In terms of One thing he didn't mention is access, is people in the Y catchment and I think that's massively important. What we're doing this year or next year is opening what we're going to be calling the Willow Walk, and it's an access for wheelchair access all around our river, all through the AOMB, all through the SSSI, to allow people to come and enjoy the river. It's got lots of notice boards, it's got lots of picnic sites, and we're actually going to encourage people to come and have a look at the way we farm and explain how we farm and why we farm the way we farm, but also allow everybody to come and have a look and access our farm.
So I'm going to be greedy and have two answers. So with my professional hat on, I, as a representative of Puffin and the Creamery, we have a presence in Herefordshire with our growers. I'm very proud, and if anyone else wants to come on board, please do. Very happy to have you. But what I'm going to be doing next year and all the years after is working with our sort of local advisors in this area to see what we can do to support them from a supply chain perspective, looking at Bridie and Ben and Oz and everyone else. I think the supply chain has a huge responsibility to help farmers and growers and support them, be that financially or with knowledge exchange or workshops or business development, to be able to help with these sustainability goals. As Ben said, everyone thinks they're doing their best. It might be a slightly different version to what the general public sees. So we are going to continue supporting and collaborating where we can. Privately, at home on the farm, we have an incredible opportunity and we're hugely lucky. My goals in the next year is we've got a couple of water projects to do at home where we can start to attenuate some of the silt coming downstream in our brooks through various ponds, working with Wildlife Trust and various other people. So yeah, professional and personal goals to stop the river bleeding soil, I think is always a good one.
Thanks so much. Mark.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that question, Andrew. My first answer to the question would be, I'm going to carry on farming because I'm a farmer and I'm going to produce food, and we need to produce food in this country. So that's going to be the first part of what I'm going to do. I'm then going to work with everybody and everybody's that are in the room here today to try and look at how we're farming and come and see us. And I'm not saying all our practices are bad, I'm not saying all our practices are good. But there's a lot to learn, but I think if we involve everybody and look at what we're doing, we're all striving to be good farmers. But I also like to add that some of the topics we're looking at today, every single person in this room is adding something to what we're talking about. Every single person that visits Herefordshire, steps foot in Herefordshire, or steps foot in the surrounding counties of Herefordshire, is adding to the problem. It is not one person's problem here, it is everybody's problem. We all eat. This produces a huge amount of phosphate. In everything we do in our daily lives, we are producing all these things. We are humans and we are doing activities. And I think we all got to remember that we've all got a contribution to make to solving this within farming and with everything we're doing in our daily lives. So every single person is not helping or helping with the problems we got. And I think we've got to remind ourselves that it isn't just one industry or one person, it is everybody in a combined effort. But we will strive to work with as many people in Herefordshire and as many bodies that are here today from the Y Foundation and things to make sure that the best of our ability, while we're farming, while we're producing food, that we will try and do that in the very best way to look after the environment. And that's why I started my talk with I am intensive, but I also want to be sustainable. And I think that's my message. It's probably not a message that's the most popular thing here today, but I feel as a duty as a farmer, I need to produce food. And that is my job, and that is my income.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, just while the audience reload, Ben and Emma, you are both participants in the Y-Scapes Landscape Recovery Project that we've convened. For those who aren't already aware, that aims to bring together 50 land holdings covering over 5,000 hectares of farmland, mainly in the floodplains, 60 kilometres rising up to now 80 kilometres because we've had so much interest in joining the project, stretching from Leinster all the way to Simons Yat. what sort of opportunity do long-term environmental schemes like landscape recovery offer you personally at your own farms as participants?
I think the biggest thing for me is all our land that floods, 65 hectares, with the weather patterns we're now seeing. I was talking about this to you earlier, but with the weather patterns we're seeing, 65 hectares, flooding most of the winter is now not suitable to most crops. What it is suitable for, because it's high, it's very good soil, it's silt soil, it grows potatoes very well. And funny enough, therefore we end up growing spring crops of high intensity. So it could be maize, it could be potatoes, it could be any of these high value crops. They're often right on the shoulders of the season, so when you've lifted the potatoes, can you then get something green in after it? But they're high value, and they make, like Mark says, at the end of the day, this is our income. We farm to make money. It's a business. So in order for us to change our practice and, in a wonderful world, put it all back down to grass meadows, because when there was not that opportunity to grow it, then I need compensation that's equivalent to if I was growing potatoes, sugar beet, maize, and everything else that is possible down there. At the moment, we are miles away from that conversation. And at the end of the day, we've got to make money as business people. So one exciting thing for me is some might have the opportunity and a conversation saying, right then, Ben, that's 65 hectares, we're going to put in beautiful water meadows and put scrapes in and all that sort of thing, and no problem. And for 20 years, you will be realised that the cash incentive in order to do that.
Thank you. Emma?
Yeah, so we have a slightly different experience of it. We are very new to our farm. We have a very little farm, very little, and it's mainly designated as wildflower meadows, and everything is in agricultural schemes already to try and enhance it as much as possible. I think the biggest benefit for us as a very little farm, which would probably be very atypical of the county in that we have more environmental schemes than anything else going on, and we all both work off the farm, is that the Y-Scapes project allows for long-term planning. So we will know that if we have a long-term option, we can get the best advice and the best support to do the best by that ground and have it left in a condition better than which we find it, and that is sort of our role. As a business side as well, again, as I say, we both work currently off the farm, but it allows for, a farm has to wash its face. You don't just have, well, most people are saying, don't just have a farm for fun. You can't have that sort of responsibility without being able to look after it and fix the fences and make sure that the hedges are looked after and you can plant some trees and do all these things. It costs money and time. So I think Y-Scapes provides a huge opportunity to be able to have some stability with that, certainly.
Thank you. There was a question here. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Go on, Sarah. While the mic's coming over.
Very briefly, we're involved in quite a number of projects, particularly in Norfolk, to do with landscape recovery and B&G schemes, nutrient credit schemes. Just to say, this is a developing natural capital market, and there are opportunities to use particularly low-grade 3 land to significant benefit, both environmentally, and it certainly pays to do so. So it is a developing, and to use that to your best advantages.
Thank you. Sorry, yes.
Hello everybody, thank you. My name is Stephanie Simmons, I'm one of Herefordshire's councillors. I also, full disclosure, happen to live between the land between Mark and Ben, so I know that area very well indeed. I am very grateful to our farmers for the high quality, good food that is produced locally and put on my plate. However, I see today's conference, there's been lots of talk about technical innovations and mapping, etc., and that you're taking, particularly Mark, low yield productivity, taking low yield land out of putting it into other crops. What I tend to be seeing is maize production, which I believe is to help feed the biodigesters and anaerobic digester plants. So we're hearing a lot about it's important to grow food, yet we're seeing drivers, external funding drivers, pushing you towards that kind of production. And we're seeing land that first of all, you should do no harm in my sense in terms of like a medical approach. First, do no harm and use the natural capital, the natural systems that you then don't have to go back and fix when problems are created. How much of are you seeing that as being an issue, land being put into maize production to feed things like that, and are you being pushed towards that by systems and government funding?
Yeah, we've got, you're quite right, there's a lot of probably land that's going into production that may not necessarily been in the past, and you're using maize as an example for anaerobic digesters and things. I have an anaerobic digester, and we commissioned it in 2014, and my father was not keen on me building one, and I said, well, we need to change where farming. And one of the first reasons I built an anaerobic digester was that it was an income stream that I didn't have, because I couldn't make enough money out of producing food. And I think this is where a lot of things in farming have changed, is that actually producing food is not the profitable thing on the farm sometimes. So we look for anaerobic digesters, and then when we've looked for anaerobic digesters to add to our farming income, we've ended up growing a lot of maize and things, and then possibly growing maize on fields that shouldn't have it. And I think there's a lot of land growing potatoes, maize, and other crops in Herefordshire that probably shouldn't be growing those crops. I agree with that, but that isn't my decision on everybody's farm to say you can or you can't grow. Everybody's got to look at their farm, but a lot of it's driven by income. Within anaerobic digesters at the moment, there's a lot of work to be done to use other things in digesters, i.e. chicken muck and lots of other things like that. And maybe over time, as we learn more about anaerobic digesters and making energy, then maybe we can reduce the amount of maize crops being grown. But I'd like to say that when you look at your farm, look at where you can grow it and take these pieces out. There's a big opportunity within government now to take out areas of your farm, and you will be planted with flowers and grasses and capitalise on that. Make use of that within your farm. You're only allowed to do 25% of your farm, I think. That's what I've been told.
On certain options.
Sorry?
Only on certain options. Only on certain options.
On certain options. But I think that's good. So I think there's a lot of work being done for what you say about that. But for making energy on farm, my father always told me when he was a boy, he grew oats on his farm, and those oats only fed the horses, and the horses were the energy of the farm. Today, it's gone round in a circle. We on the farm are growing maize on the farm to put into an energy plant to make electric. So it is going around in a circle, but I think we can get better at it.
Thank you. Tom, question here. Go on, Emma, sorry. While the microphone comes to
The AD argument, again, as someone who lives in Herefordshire and drives around the county and goes, crikey, there's a lot of maize kicking about, I think if we're living here, we might have a bit of a skewed opinion on maize as well. We have quite a lot of digesters in the county because we have a very productive county and obviously diversification and everything else. I think with digesters, they do become sort of this evil perspective of, raising rents and mismanaged crops and erosion and runoff and nutrient and all of these things. But I think inherently there's also to remember, I'll say it again, it's the how, not the cow. So AD does actually provide an amazing opportunity for us to have this demand for renewable energy and fulfill that locally within our communities. It also is a massive opportunity for reducing food waste going to landfill and providing green energy from it. So Mark with his potatoes and his crisps, things like peelings and waste potatoes and things can go into digesters. If you go down to Cardiff, there's farmers down there who aren't using artificial fertilisers anymore because they're using digestate from all of the food waste from Cardiff. So, there's opportunities. I think it might be a case of looking at how we potentially regulate it and collaboration between agencies within the county. But I'd just like to say I don't think AD is necessarily the big bad wolf we think it is. I think there's huge opportunities with it as well.
Thank you. Question from Tom.
Hello, my name is Tom from Friends of the River Wye. I live by the maxim, in God we trust, everyone else brings data. And on that basis, we set up a citizen science monitoring programme which measures nutrient levels in the wide catchment. And much has been said today about the need to produce food. So I wanted to ask the farmers on the panel if they would answer the following question. What proportion of the crops that you grow, annual crops that you grow, not perennial, are grown directly for human consumption, and what proportion are not grown directly for human consumption? That's the first question. And the second question is, based on the data that you must have in your farming businesses, in your spreadsheets and so on, what is the single most significant water course health improving action that you've taken in your farming activity in, say, the last 2 years, that you think will benefit the rivers that flow through your patch?
Thank you. Ben, would you like to lead us in?
I'm trying to do some sums in my head.
Yeah.
Malting barley, is that human consumption? Thank you. So we're pretty much 100% human consumption then. So we grow wheat for wild farm. So that's obviously for bread. Potatoes, sugar beet, malting barley. And we're now going to grow spring oats for, again, wild farm this spring. So yeah, that's that answer. What have we done? The cover crops, I think, is the biggest thing. I mean, we've been doing it for a while, but I mean, we planted potato. We lifted our potatoes this year in really good time, end of August. Didn't need to plant wheat until middle of September, so we put a cover crop in. And then we saw the weather, what the weather did at the end of September all the way through October. We had a beautiful cover crop sat there, absorbing and allowing water to do exactly what water does well. Our field stayed exactly as it was, or 3 fields stayed exactly as they should have done. And we've literally drilled them about 10 days ago into the most beautiful conditions that you could have done. It would have been a real mess. So for me, cover crops are probably something really awesome. Or catch crops. Let's not get into the finer details.
Mark, can you beat 100%? Uh-oh.
So there was 2 parts to your question. Just remind me the first part of your question again.
What proportion of your annual crops are direct for human consumption?
Right, I would say on our farm today that between 15 and 20% of the crops we grow do not go for food production. They go into an anaerobic digester. So our anaerobic digester is run on numerous different things, but some of that is maize and some of that is sugar beet. Also, to go alongside that, probably 15% of my farm I don't farm because it's into either hedges, wildflower meadows, woodland, and I don't have a lot of woodland on the farm, but maybe in years to come we will. And the second part of your question was what have I done in the last 2 years as a farmer to improve water quality?
Based on the data you've got in your farming business,
Okay.
what is the single action
in the last 2 years, I probably have done nothing to help water quality, because on the farm, me helping with water quality doesn't happen in 2 years. This has been happening for me for the last 15 years, and will probably take another 15 years for me to be able to say to you that I've had an action on the farm that's actually improved water quality. Because I can't just suddenly change something tomorrow morning and change the water quality through my soils. It's a long process of the things that work that Ben is doing, and then he's providing me, because he's doing a lot of trial work on his farm, and I'm then looking at that trial work and going, how can I adapt that into my farm? So green cover crops, we've been growing them, as I said earlier, since 2010. That's something that I will help water quality, because I can't keep coming back to it, but fundamentally what I think is the answer to a farmer with water quality is our soils and the condition of them. And I have to get that right first, because if I don't get that right first, I haven't got a chance of getting the other things right. So don't want to be negative, but in the last 2 years I couldn't say to you I've done X, because it's something I'm working on and still will be working on.
Thanks, Mark. Another question? Yeah.
Thank you. Can I first of all just say thank you to Herefordshire Council for this series of conferences and for their incredible actions to try and protect the river. They're absolutely in the vanguard of local authorities. I deal with an awful lot of them, and this level of interest and knowledge is absolutely incredible and fantastic. So thank you. My question is really looking at the river much more widely. We've heard a lot about soils, and we've heard a lot about runoff and erosion. We haven't heard anything about air quality, and this is a very significant concern for biodiversity as a whole. But in order to have a healthy river, you have to have good biodiversity throughout the catchment to prevent those pollutants from getting into the river, to protect the rivers by having trees and hedges and so on. One of the really big concerns, again, we've heard discussion about anaerobic digesters and maize, and so as an example, one of the biggest concerns that the government has raised in its biomass strategy about anaerobic digester is the use of maize as feedstock, because digestate produced from maize is incredibly high in ammonia, and ammonia results in nitrogen deposition. We know that phosphates, again, we're focusing on phosphates, it's not just phosphates that are causing the problem to the river. So we need to be looking much more widely. We've also heard mention of biochar. I mean, that entails other pollutants that we need to be concerned about. So what is the understanding, and what steps are being taken to address air pollution? Thank you.
Interesting you mentioned biochar and other air pollutants. Biochar is made in the absence of air, and therefore doesn't produce any greenhouse gases.
I'm not talking about greenhouse gases.
Okay, what gases are you talking about then?
Sort of nitrogens and...
What, from biochar making?
Sulfurs, yeah, and PM2.5.
Okay. Well, we make biochar, and I'm pretty proud of the biochar we make.
Well, it depends on how it's made.
Yeah.
It depends on how it's made.
Okay. I've forgotten the question now. Oh, air quality. Yeah, biggest problem is all these digesters were put up with the government pushing farmers into energy to make money. Massive grants, do this, do that, and then all of a sudden, funny enough, we've got a massive problem with ammonia now. Okay, and therefore start shooting the very person that actually followed the government's advice. Let's be honest, in 1974 published the white paper Mixed Farming Muddled Thinking, and therefore actually told every farmer to specialise, and have done ever since. And now all of a sudden, funny enough, that's wrong too. So we've got to have a look at the government policy and the way government have actually forced our hand into AD. Now the other thing to understand with ammonia is ammonia can get converted to nitrate in aerobic conditions through denitrification. Okay, so why the government don't start supplying farms with plants that can convert ammonium to nitrate is a very odd question, or even reverse that and convert it to urea. Either which way would be far more less volatile in the environment as the way they're producing it. So there's lots of things. So if you've given...
I'm sorry, I was perhaps sort of narrowing it down too much, talking about maize. I was giving that as an example. I'm talking about ammonia much more widely, the production of ammonia and other pollutants.
Yeah, but the way we've been pushed into ammonia, like I said, this mixed farming model thinking since the 70s. We've now got livestock farms, or you've got arable farms. We haven't got mixed farms that can actually take something like a bokashi compost of stabilised nitrogen and apply it from your own animals to your own farm, because in actual fact it's become so intensive. We've got massive slurry lagoons gassing off huge amounts of ammonia. massive problems, whereas we did have mixed farms, especially Herefordshire. I mean, renowned for them. They've gone because of government policy. This is what I'm saying. If they want to reverse things like ammonia release, and I'm massively passionate about it, our ancient woodland that's been there for over 1,000 years is now getting covered in brambles purely because of ammonia deposition. I'm really concerned. I assumed I needed to introduce pigs and things. I don't know how I clean the air up above my ancient woodland. No idea. But the bluebells are certainly getting less and less every year because we've got brambles. But I think this is all about how we actually manage the ammonia releases because of the way we've been pushed down the route of farming. So it's look at the technologies of taking that ammonia and actually creating fertilizers that are far more stable. Either the nitrate side, urea obviously will convert back to ammonia, but you could do it far less or far slower and actually make that plant available. So it's a complex thing, but the government needs to step up. They've given you the grant to make an AD, for instance, or given you the support to become a specialist dairy farmer with great big slurry lagoons. Right, give us the support then to convert the ammonia emissions into something that's less stable, and we're on it.
Thanks, Ben. Mark, did you want to respond?
Yeah, I think air pollution is a big topic. I mean, we're all going to electric cars, and that's all air pollution. I kind of get the impression that not too many people are happy with anaerobic digesters in the county. We have used our anaerobic digester produces 50% of our energy needs for the farm. When we're growing a crop, and we won't go back to maize, we'll call sugar beet for argument's sake this time instead of maize, to produce energy. We then convert that into energy, then we are not drawing that energy off the grid. So you may figure out and go back another step and look to where that energy is produced off the grid, because that energy off the grid could be giving air pollution. The product that we get, that we come out of the AD plant, is pure fertilizer. Since we've been running an AD plant, we have cut the amount of fertilizer that we are importing into the farm, which is man-made fertilizers, which I know produce a lot of air pollution when they're being made. We are now 50% less fertilizer we are buying on the farm. My small anaerobic digester actually produces enough fertilizer for the whole of the farm. But I haven't got the technology to hand on the farm yet to be able to convert all that waste product into fertilizer. And for me, that's a massive task, and I'm working on it. But I hope in another few years, or maybe when my children are farming and using an anaerobic digester, that maybe they can be 100% self-sufficient. So I think we've got to look at an AD plant and go, it's not great, there may be pollution from it, but when you've got to think about it, I've got the fertilizer there now. If I import that fertilizer, it's going to be made somewhere else, and that could be more harmful to air pollution than actually what I'm doing in producing my electric and using a waste product.